As the title says, I'm going to talk about why framing climate change as a human rights issue is so important. So I would like to start by saying that climate change is, the reality and facts about climate change have been known since about the mid-80s, but humanity has largely ignored them for a long time also because of the role played by fossil fuel companies, which has actively misled information and so on. So, but then environmental organizations who have listened to the science have done a good job in raising awareness, but unfortunately for a long time the image of climate change has been associated with panda and melting ice caps and so on. And so the result has been a bit of an alienation of public opinion and the comforting illusion that for human beings it would continue to be just fine. But then in the last decade or so, I would say there has been quite a different move, especially because coming from frontline communities, environmental justice campaigners, indigenous people's rights campaigners and so on, that have actually given a human face to climate change. And this is what actually brings us to talk about climate change in terms of human rights, because now we know how there is human stories impacted by climate change. And so, for example, we have listened to the stories of Filipinos, people being swept away by monster typhoon Haiyan in 2013, and what that's meant for so many people in terms of lives and houses and families being destroyed. Or we have heard about Puerto Rico and in 2017 after Hurricane Maria, and how people have been dying not only as a result of the hurricane but also because they were left without electricity for so long. We know that in South Africa, in Cape Town, there was the risk last year of an enormous drought that would probably leave people without any water at all. That was averted just slightly, but the likelihood of this crisis could happen again is very strong. And so we also know about how climate change impacts women disproportionately, especially rural women who are already impacted by power and gender imbalances. And then we know about, and I'm sure other speakers will talk about this more, but we know also how climate change contributes to people moving, having to leave their homes. And so as a result of a hurricane, for example, or as a result of drought, that it is eroding livelihoods, or maybe because they live in highlands or in territories that are sinking because of sea level rise. And so although the majority of people who move in relation to climate change move internally, and then either they go into overcrowded refugee camps where the humanitarian situation is dire, or they engulf informal settlements in mega cities where there is a cycle of poverty and exploitation. Or if they cross borders, then most likely they won't have access to refugee status. So they will or humanitarian visas or whatsoever. So they will either be returned to countries which are becoming inhabitable, or they will be staying as irregular migrants and with all the implications that this has in terms of instability and exploitations and discrimination. So we know that climate change is definitely a human rights issue. And this has been established also by plenty of UN reports. So we know that also is a human rights issue because of the inequalities that exacerbates, and also can set back a lot of human rights achievements that we have had in the last few years and decades. I'm thinking, for example, how literacy rates could have been progressing, but have been improving, but could certainly going backwards because of the impact of climate change. But talking about climate change as a human rights issue is not only important to visualize the impacts of climate change in terms of human lives, but also to understand what the obligations for states are. So states have obligations under human rights law and to address climate change. And so, for example, first of all, states need to mitigate, do whatever they can, all reasonable steps, but also very ambitious measures as much as possible in the shortest time frame possible to mitigate climate change. And this means reducing drastically greenhouse emissions in a manner that is consistent with the science and basically that avoids reaching levels of global warming that are catastrophic for human rights. And so we need actually states to take those radical steps, which basically means stopping our dependency from fossil fuels and improving energy efficiency and working on sectors like agriculture and transportations, which are high sources of emissions. But also states need to support people to adapt to climate change, because we know that effects of climate change are already being felt and will be felt even more, and especially felt by those who are already marginalized or discriminated. And so states need to support all of us, and especially those who are mostly in need, to adapt to climate change. And this is also a human rights obligation. And this, for example, means building like flood defenses, or improving how disaster preparedness, for example. But also it's important that when states take action on climate change, so whatever they do to address climate change, this should not violate human rights. And we've actually seen that this is already happening. So, for example, mega dams are presented as climate-friendly projects because you use hydropower electricity instead of fossil fuels. But then, if the mega dams is constructed without properly consulting with indigenous peoples, for example, is then resulting in forced evictions and the number of human rights violations. So this is definitely not acceptable. But also, as states take action on climate change, this actually should be the opportunity for not only not to violate human rights, but also to enhance human rights. So actually, the transition towards a zero carbon economy should be actually the opportunity to improve those standards that we've had so far, like, for example, supporting access to energy for all people, or improving the conditions of people, creating more decent jobs and improving the rights at work for people. So I would say that it's important to frame climate change as a human rights issue for four main reasons. So one is because this helps in terms of giving a human face, as I said, and humanize the problem, and also raise the concerns of those most affected, give a voice to those most affected and to solutions that they want. But also because through human rights law, actually we can achieve maybe something that through environmental law is not possible. So, for example, take the Paris Agreement on climate change. It asks only for voluntary contributions, for voluntary reductions of greenhouse gas emissions from states, while human rights law is more demanding in terms of what states need to do. And also, the US, for example, have withdrawn from the Paris Agreement, but they are still ratifying, still bound by a number of human rights treaties, and through that we can still say that they need to act on climate change because of human rights obligations. And also we can easily say that if a country is not acting on climate, then they are violating human rights, and this is quite a powerful message, I think. And also, through human rights, there are a number of tools that we can use to put more pressure on states. So, for example, we can litigate cases in courts using human rights law. We can use national human rights commissions, like in the Philippines. A number of people have requested the Human Rights Commission to investigate the role of fossil fuel companies in climate change and impacting on their human rights. And then finally, I would say that by framing climate change as a human rights issue also helps in terms of bringing new communities, new constituencies to the climate justice struggle. And this is because at this time in age, we really need everybody on board. And the human rights community, in a sense, those who care for human rights, also need to become active on climate change. And on this mobilizations issue, I would like to end, because I think it's from where most hope comes at the moment. Because climate change, as we have said before, is a very terrifying topic based on fear, and you can easily feel powerless in the face of climate change. But at the same time, at the moment, we are seeing quite a bit of movement with the student strikes, with people taking cases to courts, and trying to plan mass mobilizations and so on. So I would say that from this comes our best hope for bringing states and corporations to act on climate change. Thank you very much.